you know, there comes a time in a man's life where he has to ask himself, do I own enough pigs to get married? And if not, why not? See, I'm here. My name's cool guy from Carvajal, and I'm here to teach you that your lovely sugar plum, her daddy may be fat and ornery for no good reason, other than that he's supposed to be evil because he's supposed to be evil. But even so, you too can own at least a third more of the property that you own, just enough to marry the girl you like. And I'm going to teach you how. It starts with the five S's of Cool Guy Carvajal. Actually, the five C's of Cool Guy Carvajal self improvement program. The first C, cut the slack. All right. Do you have an unprofitable nephew? Set him up. Give him, set up a Urgle ambush that attacks an elf, that sends a blue crystal, that gets rid of your fucking annoying cousin, who's nephew, cousin, whatever you want to call him. Fuck him, right? He's just dead weight, eating food. You know what I mean? And then set up the assassination of your uncle. You know what I mean? Have him be killed by the Razak. Then later on, 4 books later, get rid of them. It's
What the hell? Like I thought you liked Roran.
like wouldn't that be the biggest goddamn plot twist of it all? Like
Roran, when he went away, when he quote unquote went away to become a miller.
Dude, it was all him. You know what I mean?
Thing.
Like he knew exactly what was going down.
Like he's like this plant by Galbatorix.
God.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, on that note, Book Blitz. Welcome back, everybody, to Eldest, Chapter 4, Roran. Now, a little bit of a conversation we need to have before this chapter begins. Aragon, the first book, had a single chapter told from a different perspective than Aragon himself. From here on out, every book in the series is going to have chapters where we see things from other characters' points of view. This is both a good thing most of the time, in my opinion, and a couple of chapters not so much, particularly in the last book. But in this book, we spend a lot of time going back and forth between Aragon and Roran. I'm not positive, but I think about a third to 40% or so of the chapters in this book are Roran focused, and the rest are Aragon, which is nice because Roran's story is actually really interesting. He's an everyman. He's relatable. He actually has like goals and dreams that make sense that he has worked to earn. Aragon is pretty much everything that Roran is pretty much everything that Aragon is not as far as a protagonist is concerned, because for the most part, not only is Roran more likable than Aragon, not only does Roran's character make more logical sense than Aragon's character, and not only do his tasks and exploits make more logical sense than Aragon's do, but Roran's goals are so relatable that it's really easy to like him as a character. Because really, if you sum up everything Roran is about, it is he likes this girl and he wants to marry her. And because he has such a simple core motivation, it means that everything else that happens in the rest of the series that has to do with Roran, which most of the time revolves around that motivation one way or another, grounds him as a character in a way that Aragon never is. Aragon spends so much time intellectualizing about all these different ideas for no good reason that he rarely ends up having a relatable motivation in anything. Meanwhile, Roran, who, yes, he thinks through things, yes, he talks through things, but he's not going around being 16 years old saying, "The songs of the dead are the lamentations of the living."
God.
Like, Roran is a relatable, good guy. And it's his chapters are a highlight of this book, and are probably one of the reasons why Eldest is one of the strongest books in the entire series, if not the strongest overall. But I'm getting ahead of myself. It may be somewhat jarring to suddenly have another character's perspective, since this is the first time it's happened since the prologue of Aragon, but here we are. Roran, the chapter begins with Roran revisiting his family farm, which, as you may remember, was burned down by the Razak in the first book after they murdered Garrow. Roran is really, really struggling with the death of his father. He's struggling with the loss of his farm and therefore his future ambitions for marrying Katrina, his girlfriend. And the reason is because as a farmer, if he doesn't have the land, if he doesn't have the crops, if he doesn't have essentially the income, then he has no way to provide for and take care of a wife, take care of a family. And so he feels that his entire plans for the future are now completely derailed because he can't go ahead and make progress with Katrina and ask for her hand. So he is in a lot of anguish about this. He's also in anguish about Aragon himself. If you'll remember, a long, long time ago, there was a scene in which Brom explained to Aragon that he left Roran a note. And it seems now that that note was pretty worthless. It basically said, in fact, I'm just going to read the passage where Roran himself says what the note said because it's pretty stupid. Brom's letter, bah! He had never heard a more ridiculous collection of insinuations and ominous hints. The only thing it made clear was to avoid the strangers, the Razak, which was common sense to begin with. The old man was crazy, he decided. So he's trying to figure out why Aragon left, what happened. He has no clue what happened with Aragon, why he vanished one night, and along with Brom. He's debating, was it tales of adventure Brom told? Did it have something to do with the mysterious blue stone Aragon had? Who knows? Was it out of fear? Was it out of guilt? He's left to wrestle with these issues without having any sort of answer to them for now. But the biggest issue to him for now is finding a way to reestablish his income as a farmer and trying to find a way to ask Katrina to marry him. So later on, Roran goes to town and he basically starts hearing stories of what's been going on. He hears rumors about the Shade, which we of course know is true. He hears rumors about the Urgles, stuff about the Varden. He hears, most importantly, rumors of a new dragon rider, which rumors of dragon riders go around every now and then, and it's usually nothing to give any weight to. And so he kind of just disregards it. And then he sees Katrina, and he goes over, and Katrina and he go and have a conversation. And basically she says, look, I can't wait. I can't wait as long as you need to establish yourself. You either need to go ahead and ask for my hand in marriage, ask my father permission, or this is over. Because there's going to be a more eligible match, and I'm going to have to accept it sooner or later. This leaves Roran completely distraught, and he is kind of left to figure out what he needs to do about all this and how can he get Katrina's hand if he doesn't have anything to offer. And so that's where things kind of end for this chapter. And I gotta say, like I said earlier, Roran's core struggles are so much more relatable than Aragon's. This is just a breath of fresh air. It's a breath of fresh air to have, honestly, a sense of scope, of scale, to get a sense of here is a totally different person having a totally different life, but it's affected by what Aragon has done. And I really, really like it. I like the way that he's upset with Aragon, that he's kind of, he doesn't know what happened, but he's kind of figured out over time that somehow or another the entire thing with Garrow was Aragon's fault. He's figured all this stuff out over time. He's wrestling with these issues, and most importantly, he's trying to figure out how to accomplish his biggest goal, which is marrying Katrina. And because he is so single-minded, because he is so focused on this very small selection of very important, relatable things, it makes his character instantly far more interesting, far more emotionally resonant than Aragon ever is.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, I remember I was reading this chapter and I felt like, man, I wish this was the whole book. Like, I really wish it was just, like, Aragon had never existed. None of these crazy magical things had ever occurred. And it was just Roran, like, having to deal with the Empire and shit. And just, but, like, leading his actual village throughout a medieval kingdom in, like, rebellion. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
because he's
almost kind of a Braveheart situation.
Well, because Roran actually makes sense, right? Roran's a farm boy. You see what I'm saying? Like, Roran is a farm boy. He's stout. He's smart enough. You know what I mean? But he's not. Well, you know, that's not true. Roran does philosophize too sometimes. Honestly, kind of.
But his philosophizing is never. Outside of one conversation that I can think of that happens at the beginning of the next book, which I'm going to have a lot to say
which
about
is, yeah,
that
it's never as pretentious.
Outside of that conversation, though, for the most part, I even Roran's philosophizing, even Roran's, deep thoughts about things and stuff, I don't find unbelievable or over the top like I do with Aragon. Because all of these issues are surrounding his core motivations. It's not him. He's not concerning himself with the existence of gods, with the nature of political power in a rebel organization. And granted, he's not a part of a rebel organization to have that as a topic in the first place. But there's no reason why Aragon should have the capacity for that in the first place, even in the situation he's in.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it means that because, for the most part, all of Roran's philosophizing surrounds these very relatable, very core, very human goals and traits, even his philosophizing doesn't feel disingenuous. It doesn't feel uncalled for or completely out of character usually. And that's the other thing too that I want to mention really quick, because this, like I said, I'll have way more to say about this in the next book. But one of the issues I have with the philosophizing that happens in this series is that most of the time it feels like a poorly constructed excuse for something. It's a poorly constructed excuse to explain something away. A lot of times it's a moral dilemma. And for example, the passage in the next book is dealing with the nature of murder and killing in war and the morality of this. And it feels like a conversation being had not between Aragon and Roran, but between Polini and the reader, where he's trying to say, hey, look, we covered this. Look, hey, we had this conversation. So, hey, this isn't just mindless bloodshed for the sake of mindless bloodshed. We had this philosophical conversation about it that actually changed literally nothing. But, it was discussed. So you know. And that's how a lot of these things feel. It feels like, well, we covered that moral dilemma. Moving on. Rather than developing any of these moral dilemmas into a meaningful conflict or a meaningful evolution of a character.
Yeah.
But anyway.
No, it ends up... Roran is always much more stoutly, much more country boy in a way. You know what I mean? He's hard-headed, he's stubborn, he uses a hammer, he doesn't use magic because he can't. Like, it's inherently just a more interesting experience. When it comes to Aragon, who has all of those things, but, like, doesn't appreciate them at all. You see what I'm saying? Like, he thinks a lot, he uses a lot of magic, but he never really appreciates any of it. But I don't know how to put it. Like, because when with Roran versus with Aragon, I feel that, like you said, is relatable. You know, his issue isn't some weird transcendental, you know, defeat of some ethereal unknown emperor. It's okay. I need to find a source of income great enough so that I can actually, I don't know, marry the girl I dig. And so he has a reason that's like concrete to exist and to play and to not to play to as a character be motivated. Like, Aragon's motivated by Garrow's death, right, in the beginning. And he's sort of motivated by Brom's death. But really, like, why does Aragon do what he does? Why does he do what he does? Because he's
exactly. It's sort of a vague sense of duty based on
him being the writer. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's like, oh well, I'm the writer, so
it's like, why are you doing this? I'm the chosen one. But yeah, but why? Like, oh, because I'm the chosen one. But like, but why do you care? But I'm the chosen one. And so Roran's isn't that way. Roran is not that way at all. Like, and Roran, it's funny, even though Aragon's in this supposedly interesting environment of this dwarven kingdom that has all this elaborate culture, Roran's chapters bring Carvajal to life. Like, he interacts with these other characters, with Horse, with these people, who didn't previously really matter at all in Aragon's chapters.
Yeah.
But in his chapters, you know, you get like Roran borrows a horse and the guy makes a snarky comment. You know what I mean? They have their jobs they're doing. They're singing their little songs while they're writing their work. Like, they're just average people doing their thing. And now these soldiers show up. Is this the same chapter? Is this?
The soldiers show up in the next chapter, but the point still stands.
Yeah, like, stuff's happening that's much more, because it's nowhere near as grand. It's actually more interesting, ironically. Anyway, but
yeah. Well, and that's funny too, because Carvajal was like the most boring place ever in the first book.
Absolutely. But like, because remember, you know, Aragon's stories are all about Aragon. Like, the chapters are always all about Aragon. It's Aragon interacting with someone, and not in the same way that it was like in Harry Potter, where technically Harry's the focus of like every chapter in Harry Potter, and it never really moves away from his perspective. But the stories aren't always all about Harry Potter. Sometimes he's just there and he's just seeing stuff, and he makes mistakes, and he's human. You see what I'm saying? Like, and he's not really super important, because it's really more about the fact that Ron and Hermione hate each other right now. Whereas with Aragon, it's like, Shadeslayer, you're the best. Shadeslayer, drink some beer. Shadeslayer, do this. Shadeslayer, blah blah blah. And it's not like you know, there's not many characters around him, right? It's just Arya. It's just I forgot the name of the dwarf who's his friend.
Auric?
Auric, yeah. It's just Auric. Like, But he's in this giant city full of orcs, and not full of orcs, full of dwarves and humans. But that's all that they are. Like, literally, it's just the dwarves and the humans. He goes to a dwarf bar and he doesn't meet people. They're not real people. You see what I'm saying? They're just the dwarves. And the dwarves were doing these things, and the humans in the town were doing these things. So they're all just faceless NPCs without even the benefits of having like flesh, or eyeballs. Because as far as the story's concerned, they're just goddamn mannequins moving around. You see what I'm saying? Whereas with Roran, he's in a town, and it's Horst, and he's got a family, and he's blacksmithing, and there's other blacksmith guys, and there's some feud about the fact that a scythe got stolen. You know what I mean? That kind of shit's happening around him. His girlfriend's like, look, I love you, but my dad's not gonna, listen to my protests for forever, and eventually he's gonna just give me away to somebody. Like, you need to get moving. And that's just so much more inherently like important. So much more practically, like, tangibly really important than Aragon just being the golden boy of the goddamn universe all the time because he's the golden boy, because he's whatever. And that's why I remember, even when I read the books as a kid, as a child, I just began to hate Aragon because he was this whiny, self-important piece of shit who never really had anything hard. Like, there's a moment at the end of this book where Roran and Aragon meet, and it's the most disappointing aspect of this book, actually, because you've been with Roran this entire time, and Roran, this is the beginning of Roran going on a really big journey for himself that is much more interesting than pretty much anything Aragon does in this entire book, until perhaps the very end, and even then, it's the thing that Aragon does that's interesting at the end. Who cares? Because Roran's whole story is just so much more dynamic. So in the end, where Roran and Aragon meet, Roran's been going through hell. You know what I mean? He's everything he wants, and everything that's been going on is just being just pushed and pushed and pushed, in ways that it's just not so for Aragon. But Roran doesn't get a free pass. I mean, he doesn't get some Deus Ex Dragona, Deus Ex Magica, Deus Ex God Paolini. You know what I mean? That makes everything work out perfectly for him. Although, to a certain degree, he does. I mean, in the end, Paolini is writing this book, but he's not the self-insert character anymore. This isn't Paolini putting himself as Roran, and so therefore, he doesn't get everything he ever wants. And that inherently makes him so much more interesting. Anyway, end rant.
Well, I think that'll do it for that chapter. So thank you for joining us, everyone. Tomorrow, or not tomorrow, next time, we are going to be reading Chapter 5, The Hunted Hunters. What he said. Until next time,
Oh, man.
Book Blitz.